Hello and welcome back. I'm Dr. Mark D. Baldwin, and today I'd like to discuss Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter. I want to give you a warning not to go beyond the next slide if you're unfamiliar with the novel's plot and don't want to know what happens. In discussing the novel in this lecture, I'll reveal several key surprises and plot turns, so you might prefer to first read the book and then watch this lecture. There are four essential ways of looking at the novel. The Orthodox Christian or straight-line Calvinist view is that sin's bad, man knows nothing, and God knows all. The Felix Culpa or Christian humanism view is that sin's a paradox, a source of wisdom and spiritual enlightenment or redemption. This makes Scarlet Letter a tragedy. The Romantic or transcendental view is based on the French philosopher Rousseau's view that the individual is good, the institution or society is evil, and the community is guilty. Sin is a lack of self-reliance, a sin against self. And the existential or relativistic view is that the novel's a study of ambiguity and unpredictability. There are no answers. The novel's structure is based on the pillory scenes, which dramatize shame and guilt. But are these scenes a revelation or failed revelation? In Chapter 1, Hester's on the pillory enduring public shame and humiliation with the community and power. Chapters 1 through 8 investigate the theme of punishment, and Chapter 9 is the intro and ascendancy of Chillingworth. Chapter 9 through 12, Chillingworth controls the minds of Dimmesdale and Hester. That's a theme of vengeance. In Chapter 12, the midnight pillory scene, wherein there's a personal acknowledgement of sin. Chapter 13 through 20, Hester dominates. And that climaxes in the forest scene, when Hester tempts Dimmesdale and throws away the letter A, but Pearl brings it back. Chapter 21 through 23, Dimmesdale's expiation and guilt is shown. And at the end is Dimmesdale's pillory scene, where he confesses. The novel's characters are psychologically complex, exhibiting various levels of personality and motivation, while being allegorically simple, representing human nature itself and the oppositions of the head and heart. Through them, Hawthorne dramatizes the dual irony and paradox of humanity. For example, Hester blushes at her sin, yet smiles haughtily. Pearl's is both Hester's condemnation and redemption. And the Scarlet Letter itself is beautiful. As Melville also shows in Moby Dick, a beautiful surface often disguises terror and evil. Hester is a living demonstration of Felix Culpa. She fell into sin, was punished, and consequently redeemed, becoming a far greater person than she likely would have been had she not sinned and paid the price for it. She transcended the stark, merciless society by embracing her fate and rising above it through an Emersonian self-reliance. By carrying herself with dignity and grace, she intimidated the other undisclosed, unpunished sinners around her. She became a secret sharer. Since she was the only one who wasn't hiding, who'd been exposed, many in the town came to believe in her, confide in her, and confess their sins to her. Dimmesdale was the concealer, the hypocrite, demonstrating that undisclosed, unrepentant sinners suffered a worse fate. Slowly devolving into expiation, Dimmesdale fell from the height of adulation in the pulpit to the depths of revulsion on the pillory. His failure to stand up and be a man, declaring himself as Hester's lover and father of Pearl, sealed his doom. The character of Pearl functions the same as the letter A. She's the living embodiment of adultery, and a symbol of the disorder and anarchy of sin. As an oyster dies forming the pearl, she was born from an ugly darkness. Chillingworth is a misshapen man of science, satanic, grotesque, and evil character, suffering from the sin of intellectual pride. He violates the sanctity of the human heart, which is an unpardonable sin. Yet, paradoxically, he's needed in the story for the others to be saved. This pervasive symbol represents sin with a capital S. A universal birthmark, the color scarlet is a stark counterpoint to Puritan gray. The letter A becomes a psychic mirror, revealing much about people by how they react to it. Hester is proud of it. Defiant, she trims it in gold, embraces it, and almost becomes a kindred reality with it. Pearl plays with it. As a minister, Dimmesdale is a fallen man, so he sees in the A his guilt, humiliation, and hypocrisy. Chillingworth sees the A as an abstract puzzle, for he's a mad scientist. The community sees the A as just punishment for sin. Right now, I'd like to read Chapter 1 to you, just so you have a little taste of Hawthorne's beautiful prose style. As I read, note the symbols, the themes, and other aspects of his development, and how masterfully he sets his story up. So if you turn with me now to the first chapter of the Scarlet Letter. A throng of bearded men in sad-colored garments and gray steeple-crowned hats, intermixed with women, some wearing hoods and others bareheaded, was assembled in front of a wooden edifice, the door of which was heavily timbered with oak and studded with iron spikes. The founders of a new colony, whatever utopia of human virtue and happiness they might originally project, have invariably recognized it among their earliest practical necessities to allot a portion of the virgin soil as a cemetery, and another portion as the site of a prison. In accordance with this rule, it may safely be assumed that the forefathers of Boston had built the first prison house somewhere in the vicinity of Cornhill, almost as seasonably as they marked out the first burial ground on Isaac Johnson's lot and round about his grave, which subsequently became the nucleus of all the congregated sepulchres in the old churchyard of King's Chapel. Certain it is that some 15 or 20 years after the settlement of the town, the wooden jail was already marked with weather stains and other indications of age, which gave a yet darker aspect to its beetle-browed and gloomy front. The rust on the ponderous ironwork of its oaken door looked more antique than anything else in the New World. Like all that pertains to crime, it seemed never to have known a youthful era. Before this ugly edifice, and between it and the wheel track of the street, was a grass plot, much overgrown with burdock, pigweed, apple peru, and such unsightly vegetation, which evidently found something congenial in the soil that had so early borne the black flower of civilized society, a prison. But on one side of the portal, and rooted almost at the threshold, was a wild rose bush, covered in this month of June with its delicate gems, which might be imagined to offer their fragrance and fragile beauty to the prisoner as he went in, and to the condemned criminal as he came forth to his doom, in token that the deep heart of nature could pity and be kind to him. This rose bush, by a strange chance, has been kept alive in history. But whether it had merely survived out of the stern old wilderness so long after the fall of the gigantic pines and oaks that originally overshadowed it, or whether, as there is fair authority for believing, it had sprung up under the footsteps of the sainted Anne Hutchison as she entered the prison door, we shall not take upon us to determine. Finding it so directly on the threshold of our narrative, which is now about to issue from that inauspicious portal, we could hardly do otherwise than pluck one of its flowers and present it to the reader. It may serve, let us hope, to symbolize some sweet moral blossom that may be found along the track, or relieve the darkening close of a tale of human frailty and sorrow. So did you note the birth, death, sin, punishment cycle? The role of nature? How the weeds are irrepressible? And that rose Hawthorne gave you, the reader. That's an amazing little touch, isn't it? And did you note the built-in ambiguity throughout Hawthorne, where he says, oh, certain it is, and later he says, well, I'm not so sure, we can't tell for sure, words to that effect, given by chance. We shouldn't take upon ourselves to determine. It may serve, let us hope, to symbolize. It seemed never to have known. All of those ambiguities are part of his amazing style that allows you, the reader, to determine, to enter into, in a reader response sense, the significance of the narrative. It is up to you. That's why this is such a great work of art, among other reasons. Perhaps the principal reason this is such a great work of art is its magnificent ambiguity. There are so many ways of looking at it, so many possibilities. So read on, clutching that rose, for life is beautiful, but all too painful and brief. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.